Hey there, this is Kyrie Sacharsky, your friendly local DAR specialist, and you are listening to The Radar. Welcome or welcome back to our podcast focused on disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. Today we're going to be talking about the weather. Now, I will admit that this is a very broad topic, but we are going to be covering a lot everything from weather alerts to the science behind storm formations. Today we have our resident weather expert, Luke Drosche. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Howdy, everybody. My name is Luke Drosche. I am a DAR specialist. I've been a DAR specialist down in D17, which is near Victoria, Texas, kind of in southern central Texas for the last 2 years. Currently up in Fort Worth, Texas, attending the Tatum Academy. I went to Texas A&M University for a bachelor's of science in environmental geosciences, specifying in weather. But I also have a minor in meteorology and have been interested in meteorology pretty much my whole life up to this point.
And that is exactly why I asked him to come here today because genuinely he is well more versed in weather than anyone else on our team. The last time I took a course that was even kind of remotely weather related was in college. I took like a natural hazards class, which was very interesting. Took it as an elective, and it kind of made me realize like my eyes completely opened up to the reality that a lot of people don't know about natural hazards, especially like flash flooding. A lot of people did not know what flash flooding was, which was surprising to me because I took a whole bunch of like earth and space science prior to that. And then, of course, my concentration was emergency management. So we talked about, flash flooding, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, all that jazz. And it blew my mind that some people don't necessarily all have that foundational basis of knowledge about weather or sort of like those natural occurrences out in nature. So,
Mine too. Mine too.
yeah. So I think let's just start. What kind of alerts are out there for weather?
This is a great place to start because there is a lot of confusion among the general public when there is a weather event going on, whether they see it from their TV station, from their TV Met, or whether they get an alert on their phone, one of those ones that people typically get mad at, but really should be paying attention to. So the ones I'm gonna talk about today, there's three main ones, and these are issued by the National Weather Service. There is a National Weather Service office for your area, whether you are in Texas, whether you're in New Mexico, Arizona, DC, wherever, there's a National Weather Service office for you. And within that Weather Service office, there is a warning coordinator, and they're going to be the ones that are watching these weather events unfold. They're going to be getting reports in from police, from emergency managers, from the general public that are seeing these weather events happen, or that they are seeing something on their side of things, whether it's a radar or a mesonet, which is something that actively collects weather data, that hits a certain criteria saying that this is now a danger to the public, right? So we have three main types. The first one we're going to start with is the most issued one, and it is a watch, right? So this is a weather watch. You'll see a flash flood watch, maybe a tornado watch, or a severe thunderstorm watch, sometimes winter weather, right? And these watches are issued in front of an impending weather event. So, one of the best ways that I have found to describe it is all the ingredients are there. So, like, we are making a taco, right? And so we have a taco watch. So, in front of us on our table, we'll have the shell, we'll have the beans, we'll have the cheese, the lettuce, the tomato, onions. Everything will be spread out in front of us in its own separate container, but it is all there, right? It just has not come together yet to make something. So same thing for a watch, right? We have all of our ingredients there for a severe weather event, whether it be a thunderstorm or tornado or a cold winter weather event. But those things haven't come together to make that hazard just yet. But a watch is there to tell you to go ahead and make a plan, or if the hazard does occur, right? A watch is there to tell you to turn on those alerts. So maybe pay attention to the TV, have it on in the background, have the radio on, right? Go grab that weather radio, make sure it's charged or cranked up. Um, and basically to be watching out for a warning, to be paying attention for that next level, right?
Hmm.
So then that'll lead us into a warning, right? This means that it has happened. Our ingredients have come together. Our taco was formed. This is the real deal. right? So a warning is issued when that event is actually occurring. So if there is a flash flood watch and then a flash flood warning, there is flash flooding happening or it's about to happen, right? This is within like less than an hour time frame, right? So
Okay.
if you get a flash flood warning on your phone, that means probably within the next hour or so. And they can say this in the warning that you're going to be dealing with that threat. So you need to take the proper precautions to mitigate the effects of that. If it's a tornado warning, that means a tornado is imminent in your area and you need to get into the center part of your house away from doors and windows. Or if you have a basement, get into there. If you have a bathtub, get into there. It means you need to take the precautions to protect your life.
Mhm.
So, same thing goes with a winter weather warning. Now, this is a little different because in winter weather, these events are typically more drawn out. So, if it's like a freeze warning, right, it's probably going to be freezing for at least 5 or 6 hours. And with cold weather, your National Weather Service office will tailor that warning to what your area is used to. So a winter weather warning for Dallas will have different criteria, different temperatures, minimum temperatures that you have to hit versus a winter weather warning in South Texas, right? Because they're not used to that down there. Their infrastructure isn't as set up for freezing temperatures as North Texas.
Mhm.
But with severe weather, like a tornado, flash flooding, winds, that all has the same criteria across the board, pretty much anywhere in the nation, right? So your watch or your ingredients are there. The event is not happening yet, but you need to be prepared for it to happen. And a warning that event is happening now or about to happen. You need to take the life saving precautions right now.
Okay. I absolutely love that metaphor, by the way. That is perfect. I think that's the best way to describe the difference between the 2.
Well, and it's a lot of people say cupcake watch, cupcake warning,
Mhm.
maybe a hamburger watch, hamburger warning, but it's really is the right way to describe it. And then there's a third one that they throw at us too, right? And it's an advisory. So this is kind of the lesser version of a warning. I hate to say lesser because it is still a life threat, um, but it may be a slower event. So there's watches and warnings. We talked about that. So then an advisory can be issued too. So like there can be a flood advisory, meaning that flooding is imminent or likely, right? But it's a little less serious. So a flood advisory might get issued when the water is slowly going to rise in an area that typically floods. These can be issued along the coast a lot for coastal flood advisories, right? During high tide events mixed with wind and some raining. So areas that typically flood, are probably going to flood. Or a wind advisory. So maybe a wind event is going to be drawn out over a certain amount of time. So it's still a threat, right? And we still need to take our proper precautions, but we might get a little more time, or it might be more of a significant inconvenience rather than my life is in danger right now. Warning means take protective action immediately. Advisory means, okay, let's make sure we have our stuff taken care of. This is something that's happening. Let's read through the text that the Weather Service has put out in this advisory and figure out what we need to do. A lot of times they'll also issue advisories for a large area. So a flood advisory over maybe 1 to 2 to 3 counties, or a wind advisory along a cold front that's coming in with strong winds over 3 or 4 or 5 counties, right? And these can also be accompanied by a watch sometimes. Sometimes these three things will overlap just to get the right message to you in your specific area.
Mhm. And then let's say those messages kind of do overlap, so you get them maybe in like quick succession or something like that. Would your advice be to basically just look at the most severe or the most like the highest level of these messages and say that's the one I'm going to follow? Or is it kind of dependent on the event?
I would say look at the severity, right? Um, and look at the most recent because we get these situations, especially in Texas, where we'll have a large storm event occurring, right? We may have some flooding that we're worried about, but then also there could be a tornado in there,
Hmm.
right? And so um, maybe it's a flood advisory with a tornado warning. And so we're going to need to heed that tornado warning first, and then after that tornado warning's done, then we can make those precautions for our flood advisory. But again, if you're in a flash flooded area, you want to be taking those steps. So know where you are, right? Right. Know what's around you, know your surroundings, and really look at the messaging in those warnings, right? A lot of times the weather service, your local weather service office, will put in specific areas, specific cities that they're talking about in those warnings, right? Even some of the small areas. So you can look through that warning or advisory or watch, whatever it may be. And if your area is specifically listed in there, right, then they're a little more concerned about you.
Mhm.
So I would say always go off the most severe, right? Go off the one that you think is going to have the most threat to you. And again, these don't happen as much, but always listen to the warnings. Listen to the watches and advisories too. But when you get that warning, it is really time to make some action.
I think that makes total sense. Now, this is kind of a little different. I know that I didn't know about this kind of message until I moved to Texas, because I'm not from here. But red flag warnings or red flag watches, those are for fire weather, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then does it vary from area to area? Because I know like the Panhandle, they have extremely high winds up there, which are going to be a little different if you're in, let's say, my area. I mean, Austin can get windy, but it's not going to be like 50-mile-per-hour winds typically. So, do you know kind of what goes into like a red flag watcher warning?
Yeah. So some of the things they look for in that, they look at your humidity and they look at your wind speeds, and sometimes they'll look at some of the past weather. Um, I don't know for certain if they look at your current drought index, although that is something that really plays a factor into when you have fire weather conditions, right? But two of the main meteorological factors, aside from drought, of course, is going to be your humidity and it's going to be your wind speed, right? Humidity is basically how much moisture is present in the air, right? Fire doesn't like water. So if
Hmm.
there is more water available in the air, the fire will not be able to grow and spread as quickly rather than if there is less moisture in the air. Sometimes in those real dry areas behind cold fronts, especially in like the panhandle, you'll get these really strong winds with this really dry air. And it'll dry out your grass, whether there's a drought there or not, and it'll help to spread that. So in these red flag warnings, a lot of times they'll look at those two factors. And a lot of times it's wind, relative humidity, and then sometimes they'll even put in fuel moisture. And that's again just the dryness of the grasses or the tree or the greenery, whatever type of vegetation there is there.
Hmm. So, how do meteorologists come up with weather forecasts? Like, are there certain types of equipment that's used or technology? I vaguely kind of know about GIS, and that is more or less all I know in terms of anything that you could use for weather. And I know there's more out there. So, what kind of goes into building that forecast?
Sure. So when you go to school for meteorology, you take all these different classes, and typically the way these curriculums are written is you start out very big level and kind of work your way down, right? To on a very large scale, like Earth-wide meteorology. We're talking massive, massive weather systems. The atmosphere is really like an ocean. And so there's different ebbs and flows in it, different temperatures that move around, different waves, if you will, right? So one of the major things that meteorologists look at is large scale weather modeling, right? So there's a bunch of models out there from different countries. The United States has a few, Europe has some that are really good, right? And what these do is these take some actual input from what is going on in the atmosphere, whether it's meteorological observations from aircraft or balloons that are launched from weather service offices that take things like temperature and humidity as you go up, and wind speed and direction, right? And so they'll take these input and they'll put it in with mathematical equations, and it'll give an output of what that computer model thinks is going to happen, right? But the meteorologist can't just go to that model and trust it 100%,
Hmm.
right? That is where their degree comes in from what they know is typical. So those models will also take in historical events, or historically this time of year this is what's happened when this same setup is happening, when the same temperature is occurring, with the same humidity, with the same thing. But it doesn't always give the same result. So there are tons of models out there for everything from way up high in the atmosphere where airplanes are, and even above that to ground level to 6 feet off the ground, right? And there are many different models that we can look at for different events. There's better models for winter weather forecasting. There's better models for severe, for things within the next 12 to 24 hours, for things within the next 2 months, 3 months. And it's really up to the meteorologist to take what they most um, believe from their scientific experience and knowledge is going to happen, disseminate that, and then produce their forecast. Right. So they're taking in all these things that they know and they're getting some help from this modeling and historical data to really produce what they want. If folks are interested in learning more about that, you can start looking at some of the National Weather Service forecast discussions. Right. This is a really great way to kind of get your mind into what the meteorologist is thinking. They produce these to describe some of the tools they used, what they saw, and what they think. They'll also do these for aircraft. And so this is where they'll talk about more of the upper level things that are happening and more of things that are pertaining to pilots, right? But through these, you can kind of see what they're looking at, what they're thinking, what they feel is going to happen, and that's a great place to kind of really read into how that meteorologist is making that forecast.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you touched on that because that was also going to be another question of mine is, you know, how much of that forecast is based on the, mathematical data or, those readings that they get versus, their own personal experience and findings. And so I think some people may not necessarily understand, of course, you hear it all the time. People get mad at the weathermen, right? Like
Mhm.
they're gonna look at the TV and they're like, "You got it wrong. It didn't rain today," or "You got it wrong. It rained way more than you said it
Oh,
was going to." Um,
always.
it always happens, right? And I think not only is it, they try to be as accurate as possible. They do look at, patterns. They do look at historical data. They do base it off of their professional opinion as to what the weather's going to look like. But there's also some other things in play, I believe, right? Because once you issue like one of those watches or warnings or something to that nature, it does affect that city, state, community, whatever. Certain operations are going to have to shut down because of certain messaging that goes out there, right?
Mhm.
Or
Absolutely.
other businesses or operations, amusement parks, for instance, like Disney, all the way in Florida or California, but Florida gets a lot of the bad weather. Um, if there's lightning, tornado, whatever, they have to shut down a lot of like their outdoor attractions. So it does affect more than just the one person who's like, oh, I really should have brought an umbrella today. Roads might close down or bridges or whatever. So I feel like there's a lot of pressure on meteorologists to get it right. But again, it is weather. It kind of just does what it's going to do and it changes all the time. At least
It
in my
does.
mind, right?
Well, and that's just that is the fact of it, right? Weather is constantly changing, right? There are patterns that we can study that have happened for years and years. We know the mathematics and the physics that go into what makes weather happen, right? And we know some of the major, even effects of terrain in the various areas, on our Earth that'll affect weather. And meteorologists do their best to combine all these and take a lot of classes and study a lot and put a lot into the history, and they do their best to give the best information. And as far as warnings go and watches go, there is a very important balance there, right? We never want to put out so much information that the public becomes uh, or they just don't want to look at it or care
Hmm.
about it, right? And that's really hard as a meteorologist because if there is a slightest chance or concern of loss of life or threat to life and property, you want to put out a warning, right? Even if it is a tiny supercell thunderstorm, which I know those words sound like they don't match, but they can, over one part of a county that is only going to drop grapefruit sized hail on the area as big as a football field for half a mile. Um, that whole county is going to hear that severe thunderstorm warning, right? People in the
Hmm.
north part of that county are going to be like, oh, well, I can just see the storm. It's sunny here. And people in most of that county are going to be like, oh, well, we're fine. Why'd they even issue that? Well, for those, 20 or 30 people that might live right under that thunderstorm, that is a life changing event. and they're going to have tons of damage to their cars, to their homes. I mean, they could lose like everything from that. And on a much larger scale, again, we don't want to make the public where they don't want to listen to the warnings because, oh, that one time, I didn't even get anything.
Mhm.
That warning is there because there is a genuine threat to loss of life and property, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure they do that. We want to make sure they take those precautions to stay safe, to keep their family safe, keep their pets safe, whatever it may be. And meteorologists are good. They're in those positions because they're good. The schooling that they go through is very, very difficult. And through some of those classes they go through, they learn how to warn the public, right? And these classes are changing as time goes on. We are learning new methods that work better. Just within the past 3 years, the National Weather Service has updated how they warn things, right, to kind of condense some of the different types and different messaging on warnings, right, just to make it a little bit more easier for the public to understand. So I hope this answers your question, but we want to warn everything that we can that could cause harm to anybody. Even if nothing happens, if there is the chance of something bad happening, we want the public to know about it, right?
Mhm.
Um, and the meteorologists that do this are very good at what they do. They've gone through a lot of school and they know from their own experience when it is time to put that out there.
Yeah. And it's a difficult thing to balance, like, either you have a whole bunch of messaging going out there, and as you said, the public might get numb to it, or they might start ignoring it, or, you try and hold back on the messaging a little bit, but as you said, you want to limit the loss of life or the destruction of, really anything as much as humanly possible. And being in Texas, I feel like there are a lot of things that, um, weather related things that can affect communities all across the state. So, what are some of the major weather concerns in Texas that people should kind of be aware of, I guess?
Oh, this is one of my favorite questions. Well, to give you a great answer,
Yeah.
everything. I mean, we see tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards, earthquakes. I mean, in a rare event, we could even have volcanic ash come over the state. We'd have to issue a warning about air quality for that. With dust storms. I mean, you name it, we got it here in Texas, which is
Mhm.
just, that's one of the things we deal with to live in this beautiful state. But Texas is number one for the amount of tornadoes across the nation. We see the most tornadoes out of any other state. And that is something that we think about a lot in Texas. And tornadoes can mean different things to different people depending on where you live. If you live in Paducah, Texas, and you hear a tornado siren, you might go out on that front porch and watch it for a little bit and see what, okay, it's not moving left, it's not moving right, and it's not getting smaller. It's time to go inside. But if you live in down in Corpus Christi, Texas, and you see there's a tornado alert or a tornado warning, you're going to get very concerned because that's not something you're used to, right? You might not have that basement. You might, your home might be built for coastal flooding rather than a tornado.
Mhm.
Um, so we see such a variation, but as we saw in the winter storm, a few years back during COVID, we got to be prepared for all of it. We do, and that's just how it is in this state, right? I mean, we had near blizzard conditions down in South Texas at the same time we had snow on the ground in Fort Worth, all the way across the state. So we really pay attention to it all, and a lot of it is seasonal too, right? So starting at the new year, we're worried about winter weather. We're worried about those ice events. Snow, we can handle snow, right? But some of that ice events, when we get those weighing down on our power lines, you can't drive on ice. No matter how good you think you are, ice is ice. You're gonna slip around.
Mhm.
Those ice events are pretty impactful, and those typically decline towards the end of March. But we can even see snow and ice into March, right? And then between late February and really year round for the state of Texas, we have tornadoes possible. We have severe thunderstorms. They'll peak, in March, April, and May, and even into June, and then again later in the fall. But year round, we can see that, right? So tornadoes are always a concern, and along with that, large hail, damaging winds, straight line winds, right? Things that can cause a lot of damage. And then, as soon as June 1st hits, we're in hurricane season.
Mhm.
So now we're issued because we have a lot of coastline for the state of Texas. So now we're worried about hurricanes, and we have everything from tropical storms, which have done tons of flooding, but haven't met the wind speed criteria to be a hurricane, to very strong hurricanes that are very small and only do damage to 100 or so miles of coastline, right? So we really just see such a variation in the years. And then there's also fire year round, right? We have fire seasons, but a wildfire is possible year round. In the summertime, you're more worried about those drought conditions where it stopped raining unless you've had one of these hurricanes, right? Um, but then in the wintertime, it's more of okay, there's all these freeze dried grasses from freeze events, and now it's windy. So there's a lot of grass to burn. And in the summertime, well, it's drought. So there's dry again. Right.
Mhm.
But then at the same time, you'll have these droughts in the summertime. Interestingly enough, we'll have flash flood events on top of that.
Mhm.
Right, due to drought because the ground is so compact and so dry, it is not able to absorb rain at the rate that it should. So we'll get these flash flood events in the middle of a drought, just from a large scale shift in our weather pattern. And then, we'll get into some crazy heat events in August and September, sometimes in October, where we're seeing these extremely high temperatures with high humidities when that kind of moisture returns to the state. And these will be really hard on some of our populations that aren't used to high humidities or aren't used to heat that's above 99 degrees or so, right? And then as we get back into the late fall, we'll get cold weather again. We'll get more severe weather, more flooding, and then typically hurricanes taper off in November. Historically, some have happened later, but we don't worry about it as much until May and June, until we start getting back into hurricane season. But year round in this state, right? We have pretty much all modes of severe weather possible. Now, we won't get a blizzard in the middle of summer. I think that's pretty safe to say. Um, but like as far as tornadoes, severe weather, fire, drought, year round events, really, really year round events that are possible.
So, with all of that being said, because genuinely, I was also just as surprised moving here to learn that there are actually earthquakes in this state. Um,
Yes,
and
we
that
do have some.
I moved here, I was like, I got that first little email because I get the sock bulletin
Mhm.
updates, and it's like, oh yeah, there's an earthquake over in like the Midland Odessa area. I'm like, we get earthquakes here? Like, what the actual heck is this? And then also just that real weird thing of it could be, 80 degrees in South Texas and it's literally freezing up in the panhandle just blows my mind. Blew my mind when I
Oh,
moved here,
absolutely.
blows my mind on the daily. But are there any like major trends perhaps that you're seeing that may affect weather in the state? Like if maybe like hurricane season might be a little worse going forward, or maybe drought or flooding. I know we get everything, and I know it's
Yes.
really difficult to try and kind of forecast things, especially pattern-wise for the future. But in your opinion, have you seen any kind of trends that, make you lean one way or the other in terms of like what weather's gonna look like moving forward?
Okay, so yeah, we have a couple different things that are leading into what a lot of folks will call worsening disasters, right? But number one is we are seeing a lot of urban sprawl. We are seeing
Mhm.
a lot of areas that were typically forests or wetlands down south or floodplains that are now getting paved over, that are now getting built upon, right? And all of this is going to increase flash flooding. Where rain can't soak through concrete, right? It's
Mhm.
just going to run over it and look for the nearest spot of green it can. So when we pave over a lot of this natural area that used to help move floodwater out or help it stay and soak in, it just gets pushed further and further down and then increases the flooding downstream of that, right? And as we're seeing this sprawl and this kind of population bloom in our state, right? We're getting a lot of people moving here, rightfully so. We live in a wonderful state. We just have a lot of weather that doesn't like us a whole lot.
Mhm.
But as we're seeing more people move, we're having more damages now, right? We're having more weather events. The interesting thing about tornadoes, I'll use tornadoes as a good example. There are hundreds of tornadoes that happen every year that never get reported because no one sees them,
Mhm.
right? Because they're out in the middle of the panhandle. They're out in the middle of a field, right? And maybe Farmer John sees them, but he's just going to sit there and watch it. It's not going to mess with him. It's not going to mess with his crops or anything like that, hopefully. But as we have more people moving in and more infrastructure going up, more homes, we are seeing more damages because of that. And on the flip side of that, you know, because of part of the infrastructure, we are seeing that increase in flooding damages because the water doesn't have places to go. We are seeing more water consumption, right? We are having more side effects from drought because of our water consumption in these areas. And then at the same time, the last couple of years, we've had pretty high ocean temperatures. So when we do get a hurricane over the ocean, it is a lot easier for it to grow quickly and more rapid, right? Some use the term of rapid intensification. That is what we saw with Hurricane Harvey, where it jumped a few categories in just a matter of hours because it had such warm ocean water and such warm temperatures in the atmosphere to grow and envelop, right? And I'll say warm temperatures lower in the atmosphere. Hurricanes want it colder as you go higher in the atmosphere. But the ocean water itself, that energy was so hot that it was able to just rapidly intensify. And we've seen that in the Caribbean and the Gulf and even other parts of the ocean where we've seen these hurricanes just rapidly intensify, right? So that is one of those things that is kind of attributing to that rise in disasters or disaster effects. But really, it's a lot of it is the amount of people moving into areas. Uh, the Texas Triangle, where we have the most or a majority of the population in the state, right? We'll kind of say Central Texas, but that triangle between Dallas, Austin, Houston,
Mhm.
right? Or even we can really expand it down to San Antonio,
Yeah.
Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas, right? We have New Braunfels in there. We have College Station in there, Austin, Houston, North Houston, and some of Northwest Houston and Waco. Like all of these areas experience such high amounts of disasters. Houston, you get all these hurricanes, tropical weather, flooding events, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many days it was flooded north of Houston. What was that, 2 years ago? And, in Dallas, we see tornadoes. I remember 2 years ago being on the tornado in Cook County in Dallas that went through there after tornadoes had gone through Waco, right? So where we have a majority of our population is also where we see a lot of disasters. And where more people moving, we're going to have higher costs of damages from these natural disasters.
Mhm. So, how or where can Texans get access to weather alerts and updated forecasts? I know sometimes it varies from region to region. Like, I have Warren Central Texas. That is just for my little area, but I know that there are other services out there.
Yes, great question. So Warren Central Texas is great, right? Um, I'm not trying to say anything negative about your iPhone weather app, folks. I mean, I know a lot of people look at it, and what iPhones will do is they give you a great warning as long as you have them turned on. So if you're worried about forecasts, right? I recommend typing in NWS in your search bar, right, online on your phone or wherever, and then your area or your zip code. So if you go online and you type in NWS, say College Station, right? And you hit enter and you click the first link that pops up, you're going to have a forecast for the next 5 to 7 days. And then you'll have a detailed forecast with the weather, right? This is from the National Weather Service. This is the best of the best information, right? And if there's also hazardous weather happening, it'll pop it up on that same website. It'll also tell you your local forecast office on there. So that is great. The National Weather Service, hands down, best place to get your weather information for the state. What I'll also throw in there is TDM. The Texas Division of Emergency Management has fantastic social media pages. When there is a weather event happening, most of the time they will post something on that page and it'll be great information, right? John Honore and Juan Acuna are the meteorologists over at TDM. They are fantastic at what they do. They issue really, really great information. So that is another great spot to get your weather information, right? Local forecasts, weather service, warnings, weather service, and for other things going on, TDM, right? And then another thing we can do that's very important, right? If you're on your iPhone right now or Android, if you have it near you, if you're driving, of course, don't do this right now. Maybe pause and pull over and take care of this, or when you have time later, do it. But it's to turn on alerts, right? So if you have an Apple device, if you have an iPhone, right, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to open up settings and then you're going to want to go to notifications and scroll down, and then under government alerts you want to turn all of those on and make sure that emergency alerts are switched to on. This will allow you to receive any official government alert, any federal alert, and any local weather service alert that can get pushed to your phone. So very important to have these on. If you have an Android, right, you're going to want to open up settings. You're going to want to select safety and emergency, select wireless emergency alerts, and then turn all of those to allow. These are great. These are going to allow you to get these things called IPAWs, which are integrated public alert and warning system. Right? These are just various alerts like weather hazards, severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, flash flooding, and then again public safety alerts like Amber alerts, things like that. We want these on. If you really don't want those Amber Alerts, you can turn those off. Again, I highly recommend you have those on. And one other thing I'll leave you with is an app that I personally like. There's actually two. I do not have any personal stake in these apps. I just really enjoy the way they work. I think they're very good for the public to use. The first one I'll say is called My Radar, just MyRadar. This app can also send you weather alerts if you allow it to do so. It's great. It has a radar, it has a forecast in there, and it's generally pretty good information, right? They'll also have some news clips in there too of their team going out during weather events and things like that. So I highly recommend My Radar. It's a great app. And then I recommend another one. It's called Everything WX, Everything Weather, right? The app pops up as Everything WX, but within that app, you get local National Weather Service forecasts for your location that you let it put in. In the top left, you can also find those forecast discussions we talked about earlier and how those meteorologists are making those forecasts and what they're seeing. Right. And this gives you a great look at the next couple of days. It has a radar and also has weather stories. So what are the big things happening in the weather for your forecast area that you are in? Right. So this is another great app. Again, My Radar and Everything WX. These are both wonderful.
That's awesome. I might actually have to download one of those because I feel like that'd be nice to have on my phone, especially if, we're out and maybe deployed or, for traveling for something. Probably good to have on my phone.
Oh, 100%. That's what I use when we're deployed a lot is those and then some other ones, but those 2 are really great. And there's another one called Radar Omega. That one's great. It takes a little bit more getting used to, especially if you don't have a background in meteorology, but it is also a very fun app to play with and learn from. Well, it has been a pleasure getting to have this conversation. This is a really crucial time for us to push that it is important to pay attention to these weather alerts. It is important for us to have trust in our local forecast offices and our state team, right? We need to heed these warnings. We need to listen to the watches. We need to make a plan, right? Texas sees so many natural disasters. And unfortunately, we see loss of life within all of these. And some of this can be prevented through these watches and warnings. Have a plan with your family. Have these alerts on. Go open them up on your iPhone. Go open them up on your Android. Pay attention to the weather, right? Even if it's, oh, it may rain later, right? Have an idea of how you're going to get home. Have an idea of where you're going to go if it starts to flood in your neighborhood or near your home. Where am I going to go if there's a wildfire? What am I going to bring? What am I going to pack? Right? If there's a tornado. Where is the best place in my home to go? Right? Who am I going to grab? What am I going to throw in there when I have just a few seconds or a few minutes to get to that spot? Right? Make plans how to evacuate if there's a hurricane or a fire. What are you going to do if you have to stay in your home for 3 or 4 days because of a winter weather event, right? What are we going to do if there's a boil water notice? Think through these things. They could be stressful, they could be scary, but if we plan for them, they won't be. So let's pay attention to the alerts. Let's make a plan and let's take care of ourselves and each other.
I think that's a beautiful message. Luke, thank you so much for hopping on here with me today. For those of you who don't know, he did kind of mention it earlier, but he is currently enrolled in a very rigorous full time program for the next few months and was gracious enough to carve out some time to talk about weather. I just wanted to say that I truly, truly, greatly appreciate you.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you for doing these. It has been a good time. Yes, the program is very intense. We are almost done with our EMT portion. So
Woo!
we'll see how the rest of this goes, but I'm having a great time. Um, Guys, if you ever have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to my email, luke.drosche@ag.tmu.edu. Again, that is luke.drosche@ag.tamu.edu. I'm always happy to answer questions.
Well, thank you so much. For all of our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. As a reminder, we will be uploading 2 new episodes each month, so feel free to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay up to date as new episodes are released. And with that, we will see you all in the next episode. Bye!